Hello all, welcome to household training. We still have people rolling in, so if you have coworkers or other people that are wanting to tune in, let them know that they're more than welcome to come at any time. It's going to be from 10 to 12 is when I have it set up. If it takes that long, we'll use it all. If not, then we'll cut it down. The training today is going to be going over the Households tab in ServicePoint, really going over some basics on how to manipulate as households change. So if you guys have any questions throughout the training on your GoToMeeting, there's a chat box, and I strongly encourage you guys to use it. If I say something that is confusing at all, put a chat down there, and then at the end, I'm going to go through all of them and answer any questions you guys have, or during, I should be able to kind of answer those as well. So again, let me know if you guys have any questions, and then once the training is complete, it will also be recorded and emailed out to everybody as well as the PowerPoint that we're using. So again, if you guys have any questions, please let me know, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so just a quick overview. This training is going to cover the basics of household configuration in ServicePoint, best practices, and questions that have been submitted to Echo. One of the great things about the help desk is that as you guys have had questions about specific household configuration, we've taken those and kind of addressed them here as well. So at the end, we'll talk about if you still have questions, make sure you're submitting them through help desk tickets, because that's how what we're using to kind of gauge what needs to be trained on. And that's a lot of what's being pulled in this training as well. We're going to go over the HUD household data standards, because I don't want you guys to be confused on what HUD requires and then what ServicePoint allows us to do. We'll go over the actual ServicePoint household tab, and then common housing situations that you're going to see, or that we see and that we commonly get questions asked about. So a quick introduction, household modification and reconfiguration can be complicated, just like people's lives, but if you can think about it in the sense of what is actually happening to this household in real life, the terms in ServicePoint such as leave and previous household will make much more sense. So do we need to add someone to an already existing household? Did somebody just have a baby, get a divorce, change of custody? So what I want to encourage you guys is before you go into ServicePoint to start making changes on the household configuration entries, service transactions, just take a minute to think through what it is that needs to be done in ServicePoint based on the changes in the household composition. So example would be if you have a household that has a family and they entered your program with 3 people, and then 2 months later they have a child. Think through in terms of your entry and in terms of the household configuration, what dates would be appropriate to alter, or where do we need to add somebody. So as much as I can encourage you guys to kind of think about this in real life terms, whenever you go to ServicePoint and look at, okay, how am I going to actually enter this in the system, I really think that it helps answer a lot of those questions. All right, so just a little bit of the history. I always want to make sure that we cover any issues you may see due to historical changes, both in ServicePoint and in the community. So in regards to households, we think the biggest changes you might see that may have effects on our current household composition would be from a past version of ServicePoint, so version 4, and then some deduplication of clients we had to do back in 2012. So the version 4, the way that this could have affected kind of the historical mentality is that you used to not be able to move people in and out of households so easily. So again, we're talking about the actual households tab in ServicePoint, where you have an actual household and you can bring people in and leave people. You weren't able to do that so fluidly. If something changed very drastically, you would have to delete the household altogether and recreate it. So if you were still around back then when we were using version 4, there could still be a little bit of tribal belief that this is still the case, and it's not. So we are in version 5 now of ServicePoint, and the household modifications have come a long way. So you can now establish a household, take people out of the household, put people back into the household, delete people all together. You can do a lot more with the households tab that actually goes in line with what happens in real life, and that's been a huge improvement. So if that was a thought process of yours, you kind of felt like you had to just delete the household altogether to just kind of realign it with the way that it is now, that is not the case anymore. So then the other historical piece that could be a factor is that we did a huge deduplication of clients. So in 2012, the COC duplicated thousands of clients due to the fact that we weren't sharing at that time. So client A would go to agency A and they'd be created, and then they would go to agency B, they'd be created. When that happened and people were getting created across the continuum, hey, can you guys hear me? Okay. So it looks like you guys have the capability to unmute yourself. Try not to do that, or I'll just let you guys finish the training. All right, cool. Moving on. Thank you, guys. Let me know if anything else comes up. All right, so back to deduplication. So in 2012, we deduplicated about 12,000 clients. And what that meant was that a lot of clients had to be merged. So we did that on our level through a tool that we have called merging clients, but we also had Bowman do it. And when that happened, a lot of households were merged as well. So you might still see clients who are very old in the system that now as they're coming back in, they have 3 different households with 3 different configurations and different people in the households. If something like that happens, what we are encouraging you guys to do is we want you to actually look at the households, take a minute and say what is true for this client as of now. And what you can do is you can get rid of certain households if they have multiples by leaving people out of those households so that we still have previous records that those households existed at one point, but they're not going to show up on the households tab as a household. They're going to show up under previous households, which doesn't actually show unless you click on it. So the questions you want to be asking yourself are, what is true for this client as of now? Not just for my program, but as a COC, we want to have the household be true for the client as a whole. So if you do see some of that historical mentality out there in the community, or you see clients with multiple households, we'll kind of talk you through how to narrow that down so that what's on their profile is true as of now. Okay, so these were just some interesting facts that I found in ServicePoint that I thought would be just kind of cool for you guys to know. We currently have 1,384 active households. So that's, again, more than one person in ServicePoint with an open entry into a program for 2016. So if you think about it, that's really not a lot. It's not a lot of people dealing with households on a daily basis, which is why we're kind of doing this training, is we want those of you that do actively work with that type of household configuration to be, to be aware of what the changes are. So there are more than 50 housing programs that use ServicePoint to track their project entries. And then, again, just another interesting fact, the largest household in ServicePoint includes 14 people. The largest with an active entry as of today is 10 people. So the reason I think that is interesting, and I want to point that one out, is because there is a feature in ServicePoint that some people, I guess, weren't aware of, where you can answer multiple questions for a household up front so that you don't have to go through, for whoever's household this is of 10 people, you wouldn't have to go through and answer every single question for each individual. You would be able to answer what's called household assessment questions that can be answered for everybody, and then you could go back into those individual profiles and answer things that aren't able to be answered universally for that family, basically. So those of you that work with those big families, make sure you listen up when we get to that part so you're using those household assessments. Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of break down is the HUD household data. It's important for us to kind of keep in mind what HUD considers households to be and how they would like us to define them. So in ServicePoint, you have three household data elements, 3.14, 3.15, and or maybe it's 3.15. And so the first one is the 3.14, which is the actual household ID. So this isn't something that you're actively going to have to create, but what this does is it helps us count the number of households served in a project. So the household ID is automated by ServicePoint when you click add a new household. So if it's not, one of the things that they want to remind us of is if it's not evident to the project staff whether others are applying for assistance with the person who is being interviewed, the staff should ask if anyone else is applying for assistance with that person. So persons in a household who are not present when the household initially applies for assistance and later join in the household should be assigned the same household ID that links them to the rest of the persons in the household. The early departure of a household member has no impact on the household ID. So again, down here I have household ID number 42. If you create a household when the client first comes in and it's, you know, dad, and then 3 months later they adopt a child, you wouldn't create an additional household for dad, and child. You would just add child to the household that was already dad. And then you would just change the type that it's no longer just a couple, it's a couple with children. So as we progress throughout the system and throughout time and as the client's household configuration changes, you don't want to be recreating again different households because that would create a different household ID. And so something else I want to point out here with household ID is that when we report on households, we're not reporting, we use this household ID to report, but there's also a way in ServicePoint that it pulls individuals versus households. So if you are creating a household, you don't need to be creating a household for just one single individual. A household, even if you serve households and a single individual is considered to be a household in the program that you serve, when it comes to ServicePoint, creating a household is a case management tool, basically. So just keep that in mind, and we'll talk about it more as we move forward as well. So household, household is a group of persons who apply together to a continuum project for assistance, who live together in one dwelling unit, or for us, people who are not housed, who would live together in one dwelling unit if they were housed. HMIS generates a household ID. So Richard and I kind of talked back and forth about this for a while as far as wanting to give you guys guidance on when you should create a household. And the best thing that we could think of was there's two ways you need to look at households. One, when a client gets an entry into a program, and say it's, again, let's look at that household that I mentioned before, dad, and then eventually child that they pull in. If dad and dad were created and when they entered your program, they're going to be asked specific questions in their HUD UDEs and program specifics. When those questions are asked in the HUD UDEs and the program specifics, it's going to ask you relationship to the head of household in those subset of questions. That is where we are pulling for reporting on households. Okay, so then once you have created them an actual household on the households tab, the functionality of what that tab is for is to allow you to do entries on those individuals together, to basically group them together. So you need to make sure that you're answering the questions when they enter your program, the HUD UDEs and the program specifics. That's where household information is important to us. Now using the actual tab to create a household and enter people into it and take people out of it, it's technically considered a case management tool for you to use to kind of help your work. For that, again, for that case manager that has to do a household of 10, it's going to be much easier to create that household first, and then whenever you go to create an entry or services, you can select all and you can create that for everybody at once. So the reason I bring this up is because it talks about a household being a group of persons who apply together. But if you're working at a shelter and it's single adult men and they're coming in and your job is, day shelter or day resources, and you do this intake with them, part of your workflow might not necessarily be, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about who all is going to be part of your household if you get housing, right? Because they might be like, oh, well, it would be my partner and our kids, they're at grandma's and da-da-da-da. If that whole household isn't going to be entering your program that day or, whenever your client is going to enter your program, you don't necessarily need to sit there and do that whole household configuration off the bat. But if you know that, you are a housing family program and dad and partner are going to be coming in, then take your time, create that household, and then that way when you go to enter them into the program, they're already created. So I hope that made sense. I just, unfortunately, there's not a blanket statement to say everybody should be creating households. Again, on the households tab, you should be using it to make your workflow better and easier. And so when we go over the actual configuration of some clients, I hope that'll kind of clear things up. So just some special considerations on the household ID. The HMIS tracks households at a global level, and this is what we do here in our COC. Over time, as part of the HMIS system functionality, HMIS system instructions should clarify how a user identifies persons in the household using a more global system. This global system is allowed but is not required. So again, I pulled this straight out of the data standards manual, and what HUD is saying to not only us as the end users that are using it, but they're also talking to Bowman, who created ServicePoint, right? And they're saying you need to have the capability for, if there's a global system, which for us is what we call an open system, where everybody can see everybody's data, that you can use that client's profile and that client's household throughout different programs. So for example, if you were looking back at those dads, if you have partner and partner and they are one household and they enter, we'll say, agency A, well, agency A only allows individuals, then you're probably not going to check that household in. You're not going to use the household feature. You're just going to pull one of those individuals and check them into your program. But then the household's already created, so then whenever this household goes to agency B and agency B is open for both of them, well then at agency B they can use this same household and pull them into an entry. So you guys shouldn't be creating different households for different programs. Again, the client's profile is, the way I want you guys looking at ServicePoint is, it's one client profile, one household, one set of data that we're all using, but it should all be true to what the client, or it should all be in there and show us what is true for the client at that time universally, so not programmatically. Let me see, I think some of you guys are asking some questions. Oh, no. Again, if you guys have any questions, just type them into the little chat box. All right, so the next household, HUD household definition is the relationship to the head of household question. If you are fairly new, this question was added within the last year-ish, and before then, oh, looks like someone can't hear me. It doesn't look like we're having audio issues, so if you are having audio issues, maybe turn your speakers up, or yeah, it looks like it might be something local. Try logging out and logging back in. Okay, so the next question is the relationship to the head of household. So this is to help us identify the head of the household for each household record in HMIS. It facilitates the identification, tracking of households served by projects. In addition, specifying the relationship of household members of the head of the household facilitates reporting on household composition. So I wanted to just read the term head of household so that we can all kind of be on the same page, so that we are all identifying the head of household the same. So HUD gives us the term head of household that is not intended to mean the leader of the house. It is intended to identify one client to whom all other household members can be associated. There cannot be more than one head of household for any given project entry. Identify the head of the household and the relationship of all other household members to the head of the household for each household at project entry. If the head of the household leaves the project while other household members remain, another member of the household currently participating in the project must be designated as the head of household, and the other member's relationship to the head of household should be revisited to reflect each individual's relationship to the newly designated head of household in the event that it differs from the relationship to whoever was previously identified as the head of household. So if you guys remember in training, I made you guys read that paragraph because it's super lengthy. But the reason that I want it to be read is because I want us to all kind of have the same understanding of head of household, right? So one of the best ways to identify this is who is my primary client. And this is where you're going to see kind of some differences because, again, we're going to go back to HUD UDEs and program-specific questions that you're answering at entry, and then the HUD tab, or the household tab. So these are two different things again. So and this is where you'll see differences from program to program, right? Because say the family of two that I was talking about, dad and dad, are coming into your program, and one of the dads is a veteran, right? And you're an SSVF program. And so when you answer what the relationship to the head of household client or question in the actual HUD UDEs, when you answer that question, you would pick dad 1 as your head of household because you're a veterans program and he's going to be your primary client, right? But then that same family would go to a different program and say it's a program for disabilities and the other dad is the one that has the disabilities. Well, for them, their primary client might be dad number 2. So where it matters on how you're answering that specific question for reporting and for your specific program is when you're answering the HUD UDEs and the program specifics. That specific question that says relationship to the head of household, that's what gets pulled in, okay? So where it can be different and where you might see changes from the client circulating is on the actual household tab. It asks the same question. It says, what's the relationship to the head of household? And it asks you what everybody else's relationship is. Those two questions, though they're the exact same thing, don't talk to each other. So if you want it to represent what you see and how you're working with your client, you can just change that to go with whatever your program is doing. Because again, the housings tab is a case management tool. So it's not, if you change it there for client, so again, dad 1, who's a veteran, you identify him as your primary client, and so he is self, and then the other, his partner is, significant other, and in the households tab, that's what it says. But then whenever this household goes to a different agency, they could potentially switch that on the households tab, and it's not going to affect any of your data because those questions don't talk. So that's kind of the biggest thing to remember when it comes to those questions. You should be asking, who's the head of household is just who's your primary client. You want to make sure you're answering that for the entry into your program. So again, let me know if you have any questions, and we'll kind of clear it up once we get into actually going over some of this in ServicePoint. So just some nuances about the relationship of the household. Children born during a project enrollment who are expected to live with the residential project enrollee should be entered into the HMIS as of their birth date. So again, we talked about dad 1, dad 2, and then 3 months later they have a baby that's coming into their household. If they entered your program on January 1 and now it is May 1 and the baby is born, then the baby's entry date would be May 1 for that program. Children of custodial parents who may have regular but not full-time custody of the child should enter them into HMIS in a residential project if they are living with the parent during the project stay. However, if the visitation is so sporadic or short-term, you may house them without considering them in the reporting scenarios or HMIS. These situations, unfortunately, don't have a one-size-fits-all ability. We suggest whatever method you use to document the rationale and approach in your case files for monitoring purposes. So again, this kind of gets into program specifics, right? Who does your program accept into whatever program that they're going into, and then using that to kind of identify who you're going to include in the household. So again, on the households tab, if the client comes to you and they're like, I'm in a part of a household of 10, and you're like, okay, that's a lot of people. If you were to get housing today, would they all come with you? And they're like, oh no, it would just be 3 of us. Okay, well then we can start with those 3, and then as we continue, if those other 10 people or 7 people end up coming around, then we can add them in, because that saves you guys time as well. You don't need to be just adding a bazillion household members that maybe eventually never even come in. And so last thing is, generally when a group of persons present together at a project as a household or family unit, no matter what the configuration is or if a minor is among the members, one of those persons must be designated as the head of household and the rest must have their relationship to the head of household recorded. So again, I find it best to just kind of ask, or just kind of assess who's my primary client and then just identify everybody's relationship to that person. Whereas you don't necessarily need to ask them who's the head of your household, because it's not a question of like, who do you guys want to be the head of the household? HUD gives us this as a way to report. And so we just need to identify someone in that household and then identify who everybody else is to that someone. So it's not necessarily something that you have to be asking, but it's something that you guys can have a conversation about. I just find that asking it that way, who's the head of your household, can sometimes be interesting. Hey guys, just real quick, if you cannot, or I guess if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm getting other questions about audio issues.
So check to make sure that you're on a computer and not phone.
So if you are on a phone, that might be why you're having some issues. Katie is going to assess those problems and she will be helping you guys in the chat box. I'm going to keep going. Okay. So again, with the relationship to the head of the household, response category description. So a household is a single individual or a group of persons who apply together to a continuum project for assistance and who live together in one dwelling unit, or for persons who are not housed who would live together in a dwelling unit if they were housed. So again, where it's saying a household is a single individual or a group of persons, we do report that a single individual is considered a household. But what I'm saying is that you don't need to create an actual household in ServicePoint under the Households tab, because we pull that data from the way you answer the HUD UDEs and the program specifics. What the Households tab is for you to be able to use as a case management tool. So there's no reason to have a household of one on the Households tab. Head of household may be alternatively thought of as the primary client, the eligible individual, rather than a fixed designation. The HUD UDE question relationship to the head of household should be answered per each client entering your program relative to whoever is designated as the head of household, which is relevant to that entry. So you may but are not required to change the household relationship on the household tab. Okay, so it looks like we're getting some questions. Let me go ahead and go to those questions. Regarding newborns, should we add their residence prior to program as hospital or staying living with the family? We're going to look in the data standards to see if it gives us better clarification. I mean, for newborns in general, I don't think that it does for residents prior to project entry, but I don't see why hospital wouldn't be sufficient. We're going to take a minute and look into that as well.
Any questions we can't get answers on the spot, we'll follow up.
Yeah, so any questions we can't give you guys answers to on the spot, we'll follow up as well. But as far as the actual relationship questions and the head of household questions about newborns in general, just want to make sure that you guys are aware that their entry date is going to be their birth date. All right, so the actual ServicePoint Households tab, we're going to go over what that looks like and what are some common problems that we see. So the Households tab is created as a case management tool to help us manage our households, easily assign entries or services to a group of people, and make it faster to correct data in ServicePoint. So creating a household makes it faster and easier to record data in ServicePoint by grouping clients' records together. The user may update or provide services, enter a release of information, or create an entry for all household members in one action, thereby eliminating the need to individually create entries for each member receiving services. So again, this is where I'll point out why it wouldn't make sense to create a household on the Households tab for a single individual, because part of its sole purpose is to make it faster and easier to do these things. And if you're just doing it with one person, you're actually creating more work for yourself by going through and doing that. So it is suggested to create household members before creating an entry exit, ROI, or service transactions. This allows the household information to be included in each entry. So again, this is when you're in ServicePoint and you are creating an entry, you're putting in an ROI, you're creating a service, and it will ask you at the top, it says household members. If you create that household first, it'll let you include all of those household members. And again, this is a new feature that's come in ServicePoint 5, but again, the point being that if you are dealing with more than one person and you are going to be including them into your program, or you are going to be answering a lot of the same information on all of those people, then you can go and bring them in. So whether it's 2 people you're working with or 10, you want to try to create that household first so that when you move forward and you do these things, then you can bring them all in. It works similarly with shelters as well. It's a little bit different, but if you're a shelter of one, or a shelter where you can only have one person in one slot, one entry slot, it'll still give you the option to include everybody in there, but you would have to go through and add them still in different shelters, beds, I guess, entries. And so this is kind of a program specific thing, because maybe the workflow at your program is a little bit different, but if you have the capability to create a household before you do anything else in ServicePoint and you have a family, that is our suggestion. That's the way it was created in ServicePoint. If not, then you're just doing it for tracking purposes, and that's not the point of the households tab. The point is to make the case manager's job a little bit easier by creating that household first. So these are some common housing situations that may require household reconfiguration. So what we're going to do is go over some of the situations that we see and talk about how we should best handle them. So these are the common housing situations that may require household configuration. So creating a brand new household, depending on whether your program is set up in ServicePoint to either create an individual, or if your program deals with families a lot, right off the bat, it might give you the option to create a household when you're creating a single individual. So like BSS Plus, for example, anybody that has access to BSS Plus and uses that as their primary to create clients, it gives you an option right off the bat. Do you just want to create an individual client, or do you know off the bat that this is going to be a household and you can create them as a household? So that is the recommended way to do it. If you are working with households of more than one person, it does make things a lot quicker. So creating a brand new household can be done in a couple ways. Adding a new member to a household that already exists, again, making sure that we're not just creating a new household, but we're using the current household and just bringing people in, and then just making the dates appropriate. So removing a household member from a household that will still remain. So this would be if a family was in a program and then somebody from that program is leaving, but the rest of the household is going to stay in there. So we'll talk about what that would look like. Adding a newborn baby, removing everyone out of the household. And so what the point of that would be is that you don't want to just delete the household if the household like divorces or splits up, or they're no longer identifying as a household unit. You can remove everybody from that household, and what it'll do is it'll take that actual household tab, or on the household tab you won't see anything, but if you click on previous households, it'll show you that they once had a household. So we'll go over that. Adding household data at entry, so answering questions that are true of all household members. Again, this is beneficial if you're working with 2 to 10 clients in a household. There are some questions that can be answered for everybody that are the same, right? So like maybe residents prior to project entry, maybe this household of 3 all came from place not meant for habitation. So we can answer that question true for everybody. Whereas questions like date of birth, we're going to have to go into their profile and do that. But what this feature allows us to do is answer as many of those questions that are universal to most of or everybody in the household. So we'll go over how to do that. And if you don't see that and you don't see that set up in your program, let us know, because it's something we do have to turn on. But we do have it turned on for the most part for programs that we have been told work with households in some capacity. So clients rejoining a household, deleting household members that were added in error, so completely adding in somebody they shouldn't have. We'll go over the household history report, how to use that, exiting the household from your program, closing out service transactions for all or for just individuals, adding someone to an entry that was not included in the first place, including all household members at program entry, showing previous households and household that is splitting up, but both halves are remaining in the program. So that's one like weird nuance that Richard said he'd seen in the past where a family came in, say a family of 4, everybody was going to stay in the program, but they weren't identifying as one household anymore, so they were going to split up. So just kind of talking through like how we would handle that situation. All right, so we are going to go over examples of the changes in households. If you have access to the training site, I would suggest you get on. You can follow. Don't do anything in the clients that I'm going to be using, but you're more than welcome to look at it. So these are examples of the changes in households. I'm going to be using the following 3 families to show the above examples of changes in household composition. So we're going to use client ID. They have a household already established, or client 60. We're going to create a new client and their family, and then client 114 with their household as well. So these are the 3 families that we're going to be working with. Family number 1 is Brad Pitt. He currently has a household with his wife, Angelina, and their child, Zahara. They are entered into the Caritas Terraza PSH program. They entered January 1st, 2016, and the client was previously married twice. So some of the changes we are going to see with them and that we're going to have to handle is we want to show their previous households because we want to make sure that the household configuration is set up appropriately. It said he had some previous marriages, so we want to make sure that that data looks cleaned up. We're going to show we need to remove everyone out of households to get rid of the old households from his previous marriages. We are going to add a baby for May 1st, 2016, and then we're going to exit the household from the program to their own housing on May 25th. So again, the goal just kind of, instead of just showing you examples, I want you guys to kind of get the idea of this family, this picture in your head. So for this specific family, they are already in ServicePoint. They're already created. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to ServicePoint, and we are going to deal with the changes that Brad Pitt's family is having right now. So let's go ahead and switch to the training site. All right, we are in the training site. And we are going to be working with a family that is already created. So I said that he was in, let's go ahead and do this so we can see both. I don't like that. Sorry, give me 1 minute. All right, here we go. Okay, so this family is currently in Caritas Terraza, so I'm going to shadow somebody who is in that program. We have Caritas Terraza. Okay, so you go to the client, and he is number 60. And here we can see that he has a household, the household that we talked about, Angelina, Zahara, and that's household 42, but it's also showing a previous household as well of when he was with Gwyneth, right? So one of the things on the household changes that we want to look at is we want to be able to clean this up. So one of the things that I talked to you guys about was cleaning this data up is all a case management tool. So anything on this households tab that you're working with, it's not going to affect any of the data and entries and service transactions unless you ask it to, or unless you are going to a service transaction or an entry and including them into it. What this households tab does is it tells us as a COC what's true for this household as of now. So you can clean stuff up here without it affecting your program's data. So the first thing on our list for Brad Pitt is to just show the previous households. So if you click on that, if you're on the summary tab, it's not going to give you the option here to view any of the previous households, but if you click on the actual households tab, it'll show you however many households. So you can see that this person has household 42 and household 43. So clearly too many households. And then if you click down at the bottom, it says previous households. So this previous households tab down widget down here was newly added this like last year and a half, I believe, in ServicePoint 5. And what it allows you to do is see that they were in a household. He joined this household in 2000 and left the household in 2005. Well, if you click on the actual household, you won't see anybody in the household because we've left them so that it doesn't pull up here. But if you click on this household history report, it'll tell you all the specifics. So in 2005, or not 2005, he was married to Jennifer Aniston, and they were together in 2002, and then they split that household. So we left them out of the household. And so if you're looking in this household, something were to happen, down here under household members, there's a previous household members tab for this specific household. So say he were to get back with Jennifer Aniston and we needed this household to be reconfigured, down here there's a previous household members rejoin household button. If you click on that, it's going to say, when did this person rejoin and does this change the composition of the household? So we're not going to do that, but what I want you guys to realize is I didn't just delete this household. I wanted to show that there was a history here. So I left the household members that were currently part of this household. And I'll show you guys what that looks like with his other household. So this is a previous household saying he was with Jennifer Aniston back in the day, 2002 to 2005. We can see that now. We can see the history of what happened when they came, when they left. So we want to be able to see that, especially for those of you that are working with clients that are in housing programs and you want to be able to see the history of, where they've been, what they've been doing. So the household that's true as of now is this 42 couple household, and there's this couple 32 that's no longer true, and we need to clean it up because they left the household and it's still showing us here that they're together. So we're going to go to manage household, and this is how to remove everyone out of an old household to get rid of it on this tab. So on this tab, we don't want this household even showing up right here. We want it to be only under the previous households tab. So we're going to click on that Manage Households button. Again, you don't want to delete it. It would get rid of it altogether and it wouldn't affect any data, but we want to be able to see that this was true as of one time. Okay. So you're going to leave the household members. So you're going to click the red minus sign, and it says, by removing this client from the household, you'll no longer be able to associate them with the household information, including goals, case notes, case manager, shelter stays, and service transactions after this date. Please select the date that the client left the house. And they joined this house in 2016, or no, not 2016. They joined, so we're just going to say that they left the same day so that it'll take them out. So it took him out of the household, take her out of the household, and now this household of couple 43 doesn't have anybody in it, but it still tells us that these are the people that were in it. This is the day they joined. This is the day they left. And if you click on that household history report, it'll show us what happened in more detail. So once you click Save and Exit, now on the Households tab, you're going to only have the household that is true as of right now. And if you click on the previous households widget at the bottom, it'll now show both of those households that they were a part of. So our clients tend to have these like fluctuating households all the time. So if something happens and people are leaving or they're coming out, this is the best practice for identifying what had happened previously instead of just deleting households and creating new ones. That way we can go in there and see the historic data of those. All right, so that's how we removed everyone out of the old household, and then I showed you guys the household history report that'll tell us what actually happened in those households as well. All right, so the next thing for Brad Pitt is we want to add a baby. So we are working with this household here. We're going to look on their summary page real quick. They entered Caritas Terraza PSH on 1/1/2016, so January 1st. Well, if you click on the entry date, it'll show you that only, let's go save and continue. The entry was not created for everybody in the household. So right now we have Zahara, Angelina, and Brad but this entry, or excuse me, all of these 3 people are created in the household and they are in this entry, but if we're going to bring in another baby, you want to make sure that you create the baby in the household first before you create them, before you pull them into an entry. So you would go to the actual household and we want to add a new household member. You can check to see if the client was part of any previous households, but if you know that it's a baby and they're new, then they're probably not going to be in ServicePoint. You can still check before. So we're going to add their new baby. I forgot the baby's name, so we'll say baby. So we have a little baby Pitt here. We check, no matches, add this client, okay. So now we have the client selected, continue. And up here, they're not the head of the household, and they are I'll say daughter. And they joined the household. I said that their birth date was May 1st, so this joined household date would identify the day that that child was born. So this is only changing the household configuration. We didn't add that kid to the entry yet, right? So this isn't going to say in your program that that person's been added to your entry. This is only changing their configuration of their household. So we'll go down, save and exit. Now the family has 4 people. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got baby, but on the entry date, it's still not showing that baby that is now part of the program. So the best practice for adding a new person into an already existing entry is to click on the entry. So if you look over here, client count, it's showing you that there are 4 people at one point. She's not part of it anymore. But if you click on the pencil, it still tells you here that nobody's, that the baby isn't included, and you don't want to include them on this first portion. You want to save and exit, and where you want to be adding people into an additional entry is right here under include additional household members, now that you're actually in the entry. So you would click include additional household members, and then you would bring in baby. So this is where if the date isn't the same as the original entry for everybody else, it's only going to change the entry date for baby Pitt to whatever we say is true as of here. But if you do want to include everybody and you want everybody to get that same date, you can also change the date for everybody. So for us, the baby didn't enter on January when the rest of the family did. Then you would come in here and change it to the day that baby entered, which is the 1st. Save it. And now this household member entry date stays the same for everybody else, but for baby, come down here, save and exit. And now if you go to the summary tab, you'll have, let's go to baby Pitt's profile. You have the entry for Caritas Terraza for May 1st. If you look at the rest of the household, they have their entry for January 1st. So again, this is very programmatic, because if you have people that are, say you just kind of forgot to enter them into the system and so you're having a backdate, you can go through the same process and you would just, where I put the date for the baby's birthday, you would put the appropriate date that needs to be there. So it works the same as if maybe it wasn't a baby that was just born, but they were just bringing somebody in, right? They just got custody of a kid, or their sister was going to come live with them. You would just identify what date are they coming to enter that entry. For some of you, it might be the date that everybody else entered, and that's fine. But for a baby specifically, they can't enter until they're born. So just be aware of that. And there's this tool up here. If you're not familiar with it, switch to another household member. If you're dealing with a household that's large, it'll allow you to look at other couples, like their past households, but it also is a good way for you to switch. So if you're on the households tab, you can go back and forth through those household members by clicking here, and it'll take you to everybody else's household. So just something to be aware of, again, to make your lives a little easier. So we went through the previous households, how to remove everyone out of an old household, show household history report, adding a baby with their entry date of their date of birth, and then we're going to exit the household from the program to their own housing on 25 May 2016, which is the last thing for this household. So we're going to go to that client's entry, We're now going to exit this household, click on that exit date, and now you'll notice Baby Pitt is being pulled in here. So again, that's why you want to make sure that that household is created, because it does make your life easier. You can just click on the household at the top, say their reason for leaving. We said that they were leaving to their own housing. So completed the program, destination, own housing by client, save and continue. Answer any additional questions that you need to answer at exit, save and exit, and now they have that exit date of 5/25. So the main thing I wanted to show you guys, that if you have that household already created, you can pull them in here. All right, do you guys have any questions about Brad Pitt and his family? And yes, those things are real. I looked on Wikipedia. I'm looking through the chat box real quick, make sure you guys don't have any questions. All right, so that's a family that's already established. Now we're going to go to the next household and configure it as best as possible. Okay, so we have, excuse me. All right, so we have Wanda Sykes. She's new. She's not in ServicePoint yet. Her wife is Alex Sykes, and they have one child, Olivia Sykes. So the client and the household have not been created into ServicePoint yet. They will be entering into Foundation for the Homeless, FRI Shelter, on 25 May 2016. So the household changes that we're going to work on with them is creating a brand new household, including all household members at program entry, answering household data sharing that is true of all household members at entry, and then deleting a household member that was created in complete error. So we're going to go ahead and go back to ServicePoint. And we're going to get out of Terraza and go into FRI Shelter. We'll use Brittany. All right. So we're going to look for Wanda. She's not created. Let's search by her last name, make sure. Yep, there's no Sykes in there at all. Because if her wife was already created, it would have come up as well for Sykes, and you could have just gone through her wife's page and created a household there. So just want to make sure you're searching them all before you create. Okay, so we have Wanda Sykes. Add a new client with this information. Okay. And what this allows you to do is just create a client right off the bat, only one person. The difference of creating a household the way we just did it now and creating a household if you have access to more than one is that it'll allow you to, let's do, it's going to pull up this add a new client information and ask you if you want to add just one or if you want to add the whole household. So if you are creating households of more than one person and you are not seeing this, let us know, because it does make your workflow easier. What it does is it tells you that you're about to create a client. It gives you that same error message that pops up if you're going to create an individual, but it'll let you create a client only, a client and a new household, or a client and search household. So for this household, we could click add a client and add a new household, and it would allow us to then create all of the household members here and go through, and it's going to be a couple with a child. So now we can go find Wanda that we just created, click on the green plus sign, it's going to bring her down here. So that is the process that you can take when you're creating, if you're creating that household of 10, you go through and you do this for everybody. So you're not having to go through and do this individually and then tie them together. So now that we are doing this at the entry, we just click continue and it'll take us right into that household creation. So again, if you work with households and you're not seeing that pop up and it would make your life easier, let us know. It's just a matter of us turning that on. If you're working with single programs, then it's not necessary because it's actually an extra step, so you don't need to see it. And if you occasionally do both, then we can add it too. Again, it's just a matter of how we set up your programs originally. when we created them in ServicePoint. All right, so now we're in the household information tab, and this is for creating a brand new household. I wanted to show you guys the 2 ways that it can be done. So now you're going to go in here and just answer all the questions. So this is the relationship to the head of household question that I wanted to show you guys. This is not tied into the HUD UDEs. So you still need to be answering on HUD UDEs because the HUD UDEs and their entry into your program is what's going to be pulled into reporting. This is just for configuration of the household for case management purposes. So Wanda Sykes will say she's the head of the household. Her wife is not. And then, oh no, wait, that's her child. Daughter and then wife. Join the household if they all join on the same date. And then you can also alter the joined household date here as well. If you know right off the bat that, daughter came in later. Again, this is really just for your historic knowledge of what's going on. You can check to see if any of them had previous household members, saying that they didn't. And then you can come in here and answer questions individually for each one of these individuals. So save and exit, and now we've created a household, now we've created, a household right off the bat for a brand new client. And so we have Wanda, Alex, and Olivia. And it'll let you just kind of switch through each individual person. Let's see, including all household members at program entry. Okay, so we said that they were entering Foundation for the Homeless FRI shelter. So let me shadow Brittany. And we're going to go find Wanda. And you can already tell too, and this is beneficial when you're searching clients. If you search people and it has this little household next to it, that's not telling you that they have a household. That's telling you it's created by your provider. But on the right-hand side, it'll tell you if they have a household. You can click on that little magnifying glass, I think, and then it'll tell you what their household is and who's in it. So if you're trying to identify if this is the right person, you can kind of click on there and see if those are the people that are in their household. So let's click on Wanda and let's add her into our program, which is Foundation for the Homeless FRI Shelter, which is one of our family programs. Okay, so you can come in here, click Add an Entry, Exit, and this is really basically what I want to show you guys is this feature right here is only possible if you created that household first. Again, this is where the benefit of creating a household is a case management process because it does make your life easier. You click on the actual household number, which is 62, and maybe only one person is joining. Maybe only Wanda and Alex are joining right now, and Olivia is going to go stay with her grandma until they can, secure better housing. Then you can just unclick her and not include her in this entry. Then maybe 3 months later, Olivia's joining, and then you can do the process that we went through with Brad and go through and add that child with the appropriate entry date. So for us, it is everybody, so we're going to include them all. And we said they entered the program on 25 May, which is today. Save and continue. And it's going to bring you to the entry tab. So the next thing I wanted to show you guys here was how to answer household data sharing that is true of all household members at entry. So we're fortunate that we're only dealing with 3 household members, but on the on the bottom under entry assessments, you have what's called a household data sharing. And if you click add household data, it's going to pull up questions that could potentially be true of everybody in the household. So to include household members, you're going to click the box next to their name from the same household, and it'll answer all of this on all of these people's profiles. So again, assuming that some of this stuff can be answered true for everybody, you can use it. If that's not the case, then don't answer it. So race, no, that's not the same for these 3 individuals. Ethnicity is not the same. Housing status, they are all homeless. You can answer it there. Client location, 503, you can answer that for everybody. Residence prior to project entry, again, assuming they're all coming from the same place, you can use it. If they're not, then you would have to go back through and answer that. We're going to say that they came from the streets. Length of stay, 1 year or longer. Entering from the streets, emergency shelter, yes. When, we'll say they entered 2 years ago. Regardless of where they stayed, number of times, 4 or more, if 4 or more. And then, again, we don't need to answer all of these questions. So then we would click Save. it's strongly recommended. So, okay, when it tells you that, it's basically saying that it's not a required element. You can say no here. You don't need to go back through and try to answer them. Just say no, and it'll populate the little green history boxes, tell you who answered it, save and exit. No, again, very persistent. And so now you will have answered all of these questions for all of these individuals, and that will populate on their page. So we've had some of you guys ask us if we could add questions here. We want to be careful about that because this household data sharing is one assessment that everybody can see. So we don't want to fill it up with questions that are specific to your program, but we're also not opposed to it. So if you have questions about something, for example, we got one that somebody asked about putting the address here, like previous address or something. We can consider it and look into, as a COC, is this beneficial for everybody to see? Again, but there aren't very many housing programs, and then the ones that are there, we can kind of gauge with all of you guys if this is beneficial. So something you can let us know if you want to see that. But now when you look at Wanda's profile, you'll notice that there's random stuff that's answered. You switch over to, yeah, it's going to make me answer them. I'm not going to do that. You switch over to the other children, it would show you that they've answered, that you've answered those questions on their profile as well. And I didn't save it, so it's not going to show me. So whenever you are doing an entry, that is where you will see the answer questions for the whole household data sharing. So if you don't see this little widget right here, if you're in the training site and you're kind of following along with the household, if you don't see this widget here, it can be turned on, and that way you can answer questions for everyone in the household. Just let us know. Okay, I'm going to answer these. Okay, so this is something else I want to bring attention to, this relationship to the head of household question here. This is what gets pulled in for your reports. So this is what is true as of your entry. So again, if that's not the same for everybody, then you would want to go through and answer that individually. But this relationship to the head of household doesn't talk to the relationship to the head of household in the households tab. So just be aware of that. Now I can save and exit. All right, so we have created a brand new household for this client. We've included all household members at program entry. We have answered household data sharing that is true of all household members at entry. And then we're going to delete a household member that was created in error. So say whenever I was doing this household creation, I came in here and I thought that, you know, where are we going to go? So we're in the household, and for some reason, I thought Tina Fey was part of their household, right? Or maybe somebody at a different agency added somebody that they thought was part of the household, and you're talking with your client, you're sitting there in front of your client, and you're kind of going over the household configurations, and you're just clarifying, hey, this is the household I see. It's you, Alex, your daughter Olivia, and Tina Fey. And they're like, I have no idea who that is. Like, they're not part of my household. They should have never been created. Then there's a difference between leaving someone out of the household and deleting somebody. So again, if Tina Fey was created in here by error, she shouldn't be part of this household. She was never part of it. It wasn't like that was, you know, a sister that was in the house and then she left. She was actually created in error. So the difference is the red minus sign is to leave the household. So this will tell us history. Someone was part of the household and they're not anymore. And then the delete household members will actually allow us to come into the profile and delete her altogether. And it tells you if you delete this client's association with the household completely, do you want to do that? And because we do, she wasn't ever supposed to be a part of it, you click delete, continue, and now when you look at previous household members, she's not going to show up in anything. And if you go to her profile, it doesn't show you here that she was ever part of that household either. In previous households, she wasn't ever part of it. So that's the difference between leaving and deleting. And again, deleting somebody out of the household, just be sure that you are doing what is appropriate for that client. but also at the same time, don't be scared to do it if you know that it's true. Again, it doesn't affect anybody else that's using this household for their program data entry because households tab doesn't pull into any of that. It's for case management. So that's it for Wanda Sykes and her new family. Do you guys have any questions about any of that stuff that we went over before we go over the last family? All right, looks like all of the audio errors have been fixed. Okay, so we're going to go over the last household. This is Diane Rodriguez. Her household is 114. Her husband is Fernando. Her child is James. She's also with her mother, Gloria, and then she has a father, John Rodriguez. So the household is 60. She's entering the Caritas SSVF Rapid Rehousing with the entry date of 1 May with her husband and her mother. So the changes that we're going to need to work on with her is that we need to remove a household member and the rest of the household is going to remain in the program. So the whole household is joining on May 1st, but mom is going to be leaving the household. She's going back to, I think it was Venezuela, where this household was from. And then the client is going to rejoin later, which very well happens with our client. So the mom leaves on the 10th and then comes back on the 20th. So we're going to show what that looks like to leave the mom and then bring her back. And then when the mom comes back, she brings her husband, which is John the father, the dad. So we're going to show bringing him back as well. All right, let's go back into ServicePoint. So we said they are going to be entering Caritas SSVF Rapid Rehousing. SSVF Rapid Rehousing. All right. So we are in SSVF Rapid Rehousing. Let's go ahead and find Diane. We'll just search Rodriguez. Okay, so you can see down here that there's a couple of different Rodriguez's already in the household. On the right, click on Diane. It shows you she already has a household of her husband, and her mother. So that's the right one. Click on her. There she is. There's her household. And here is her entry into the SSVF Rapid Rehousing Program that they entered at the beginning of May. So we want to remove a household member, and the rest of the household member is going to stay. So again, on May 10th, the mom is going to move back to, it was Ecuador. The rest of the family still remains in the program. So we're going to need to exit the mom from the program and leave her out of housing. So here in the household, you're just going to click on the little yellow pencil. And we are going to leave the mom from the household. So you come in here, you'll leave her. The date that she is leaving is May 10th. I didn't put it far back enough to do that. All right. Leave her on the 10th. Save. And now it tells us that she was part of the household, but she left on the 10th. Okay. So what I want to point out here is that, again, this is used for a case management tool. We hit save and exit. Would you like to save this data? Now we have the household of 2. It's just Diane and her husband. But in the program entry, if you click on the entry, it's still including the mom. It's still saying that the mom is part of the program. If the mom has left the program and she's no longer receiving that service, there's a couple ways that you can stop her from receiving that entry, basically, or stop ServicePoint from pulling in that she was receiving that entry. So we want that date to line up with the household's date. Then you would just go to that parent, that other person, Gloria, and you would put an end date on when she left that program. So here's Gloria, here's the mom. You could just end the date that she left the program if that were the case. So that's something that you want to make sure that you are not, once she's left the household, you're not allowed, you can't come in here and just, you can't leave the household as a whole, but you can leave her as an individual. So we'll just say that she didn't complete the program, but she left I don't think she had disagreement, and she went back home with her husband. So she left the program and exit. So now it's showing that she has left the program. So let's go back to the daughter, Diane. So the biggest thing that I wanted to point out for that is that the most important part of when somebody leaves a program / household is that you're identifying on the entry exits, because that's what your reports use to pull who's in your program. Doing it on this households case management portion, or doing it on this households tab, is a case management function. So just want you guys to notice that what I did here didn't affect the entry. I still had to go into that exit. I still had to put an exit date for that person. Okay. All right. So the next thing was removing the mom, and then the mom's going to come back and rejoin the household later on the 20th. Okay. So mom comes back. We want to manage the household, and we are going to add her back in. So if you look under previous household, well, let me go back. If you are on the households tab and you click on previous households, it'll show you that there's not a different household, so that's not where the person is. But if you click on manage households and then previous households in that tab, it'll show you that Gloria was once part of the household. So if you click on this little blue arrow thing, it'll allow you to rejoin her to the rest of the household. So again, you want to do this because then you can now pull her in from the entries tab once you've done this. So you want to select the date that the client rejoined. We said she rejoined on the 20th. She wasn't gone for a long time. Is she the head of the household? No. And what is her relationship? That'll still auto-populate from what it was. Unless it's changed, then you will save, and it'll now put her back in the household members tab. So you click save. You can save it so that the data is there. But we also want to add that she brought her husband with her. So you can do the same adding process here. Add. Her husband was never part of the household before, so you can't bring him in. You're going to have to add him completely. So adding clients to the household. So we're going to go down here and look for John. There he is, John Rodriguez. We're going to click on the green plus sign. It's going to bring him down here to selected clients. Continue, and now John's part of the household. Again, you want to make sure that you're answering the head of household relationship, head of household questions. He's the father. And he joined on the 20th when mom came back, so we can just switch that date to the 20th. Come down here, answer anything we need to answer about all of them, save and exit. Strongly recommended you review the fields for head of household, relationship to head of household for all clients to ensure the information is correct. Let's do that. Did I not answer everybody? Yes, no, no, no. Yes, self. Husband, mother, father. Okay, it's correct. Save and exit. And so now we have added someone in to the household, but we didn't add them into the entry. So if John needs to be added into this entry because they're also going to be pulled into this Caritas SSVF rapid rehousing, then we need to make sure that that entry is true for everybody. So here's where it becomes programmatic again, because if all of those individuals should have been added from the get-go, like they should all have the same entry date, because for your reporting purposes, you need to identify that the whole household was there. It's not important for you guys specifically to have a record of when individuals joined. Then you would just go to John's page profile and add that entry, include him in the entry. But what you're allowed to do here is if the entry for John should be the same and should be backdated to when they all joined the program, which was May 1st, then you can add that here. If John joined later than everybody else and you want to identify that, you can identify that here. It's not going to include everybody else. Save and exit. Save and exit there. And now we're in Diane's. She's still showing the 2nd. And John's entry is going to show the 20th. So all the same entry, they're just having different entry dates. So again, programmatic, because depending on what your program is, they might say, hey, we want everybody to be set on the same date, or they might say, no, we have funding based on who's in the program at the time, so we need to have a history. So the that specific question is programmatic, but what I want to show you, what I want you guys to be aware of is that when you're adding people into entries and you're taking people out of entries, you want to do it, you want to go to the entry, click on the entry date. You don't want to change it here on this first tab. You want to go past here, save and continue. You want to change it on the actual tab itself under include additional household members. What this will allow you to do is change dates for either everybody at once or just that one individual as well. So in here you can kind of see a history of the differences of when they entered the program, and then this could be changed based on everybody if you wanted to change it for everybody, or you could go through and do it individually. So again, huge time saver for people that are working with huge families to make sure that you can include somebody into an entry that was not included in the first place. All right, what questions do you guys have? That is actually it for the situations. So something to be aware of and something to keep in mind is households are going to change. They are going to fluctuate. And the two things that you need to keep in mind is how does this affect my entry and how should I appropriately record that and document that? And you really just going to want to think about dates. When are they coming into the program? When are they leaving? And then the second thing is that the households tab is used to make your job easier as a case manager, because whenever you do things, whether it's entering people, exiting people, if you have the whole household there, you can just include them in all of that. So a couple of things to remember. You do not need to create a household for a single individual. You will, however, still have to answer the HUD-UDE relationship to the head of household question as so. So if you have questions about this, please let us know. But for the actual households tab, you don't need to create a household because that tab is used for case management function. And if you are not needing to include more than one household member in an entry or an exit or a service transaction, then you're creating more work for yourself by creating a household for a single individual. A client should ideally only have one household in their profile, so you do not need to create a new household if you look at the client's profile and the household you see doesn't look accurate. Simply modify the current one by adding, leaving, or deleting folks. So again, this is where it comes into play that we are working with globally as a COC, we are all working together, right? So if you see a household in the client's profile and it looks all kinds of messed up, don't just create a new household and say, well, I'm just going to use this new household for my program. Take it upon yourself to manage that specific household so it is accurate, because if you're sitting there with a client and you have better data than somebody did a month ago or a year ago, then do what you need to do, clean it up so that moving forward we can all use that household into our program. But there's no need to have more than one household on a profile. If a client was ever added to the household by complete mistake, don't forget that you can delete them and they will no longer be in the household. Don't be afraid to delete them out of the household. Again, that doesn't do anything to your entry, exits, service transactions, records. It just won't allow you to pull them in next time you do it. But if there's someone's telling you, like, I don't even know who that person is, they should have never been there, then feel free to exit them, delete them. And lastly, don't worry, we know it's complicated. Our clients have complicated lives. That's the reality. We all do. And so taking ServicePoint and having us try to figure out how to best represent that in a household configuration, sometimes it takes more than just you guys working on it, and that's okay. If you see a duplicate household, if you think you should delete a household, if it's a crazy household configuration you just can't seem to figure out, you can submit a HMIS help desk ticket using the category household configuration. So if you click on the actual help desk ticket, there's now a option that's just specifically household configuration. Go ahead and just select that option, and then underneath that option, just explain to us what the problem is. Give us the client ID, give us the household ID, and then just kind of explain, this is what I'm needing to do. There are also great resources if you click in ServicePoint on the households tab and you click on the blue question mark, which you guys should know by now is my favorite. It'll bring up some basics of things that we went over today. So under client households, it'll show you how to create a new household, how to edit a household, how to manage a household as changes come up. So adding a client to an existing household. It also hits on some of the entry exit questions as well that we went over. So please don't hesitate to ask. And let me see if you guys have any more questions before I wrap things up.
When this question's going on, it's coming obviously.
All right, guys, so if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in now or let me know. Okay, so Linda asked a good question. She said on the same record, so talking about Diane and her family, how about the exit that was created for Diane? Would you just remove it or would you have to re-enter an entry date? So again, it really has to do with your program specifically. But if we're talking about Gloria who came in and then left, where's she at? And she had an exit date. If she exited but then came back, and programmatically it doesn't matter that there was a gap between her entry and her exit, then you can just go in there and remove that exit to show that she is still part of that entry. And then it's going to show that she's still part of it. When you guys pull a report, that's going to pull her in. If that isn't the case and you guys need to show that she was gone for a week, then you can absolutely recreate an entry for that specific program. I would almost suggest that we should just delete it and not create a new one if she's still in that program with the whole household. But again, if your program has specific requirements for tracking, daily, weekly, monthly reporting on who's in the program in that capacity, then it might behoove you to end it, leave it ended, and then start a new one. But you won't be able to pull her back into the new one as a household, because we wouldn't want to create a whole entry for the whole household. We would just want one for her. So hope that helped clear it up. All right, guys. Well, I am done with you all. I hope this gave you guys some clarity on households. Again, the last thing that I want to say is the biggest thing to remember is it's there for you to use to do case management and make your lives easier. So I encourage you to use it. If you have any questions about how to do some of this stuff, I'm going to record. This was recorded, so we will post it so you can have the walkthrough of how we did everything. I will also include the PowerPoint. And on the HMIS training page, there are some basic walkthroughs on how to set up household information. Let me see. I got one more question. Do we need to go back and remove households? I have a client that have multiple households. Absolutely, you can remove households. Again, if you see duplicates, the way you guys should be looking at your clients at your caseload is this is one client with potentially one household is what they should have. So you can take it upon yourself to go back, look at those other households, and do some managing of those households. Should they still be part of this household? If so, let's go ahead and add them. But yeah, you shouldn't have clients with multiple households. So you can absolutely go back and again, remove people out of the households if you still need to show that it once was a household. Basically, just kind of ask yourself which of the households needs to be true and there, and what do we need to do with the rest of the households. So great question. You can definitely go back and remove households and remove people out of old households. So thank you guys so much. If you guys have any questions following this, please let me know. We are always available for any questions. I hope this was sufficient for you guys that needed some clarification on households, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.